son John, if you'll forgive a little bit of parental pride. John went to Beloit in 1972.
88.
88.
Yeah. 72 was a year old, it was not that good.
He was a student at Beloit College for 4 years, and he stayed on as an employee. So he's been in Beloit for probably pushing 30 years. But 4 or 5 years ago, he left the college and went to Thrivent. He runs the Thrivent office in Beloit. And just to give you a simple example, I thought I knew everything there was to know about financial planning, but John proved me wrong. We had developed a series of CDs, certificates of deposit, that we'd laddered in time, so they continued to roll over, and that was our emergency fund, if you will. Back in the late 60s, when I went to work at Cable News, I started buying life insurance, whole life. And over the years, those policies generated cash value. Well, John pointed out that the cash value in our life insurance not only could be our emergency fund, but at some point in time, it would replace long-term care. And that really, again, I thought I knew everything there was to know, but John pointed this out, and we have used the CDs that were the emergency fund for an investment vehicle, and our long-term care policy, at least for me, has been canceled, and we're going to rely on the cash value that's built up in those policies. Just a simple example of what my son did for us, and if you're interested, things that he might be able to recommend for you or to your financial advisor. So take it away, John.
Thank you. So when I was called, I don't know, 8 weeks ago to do this, I thought this would be great. And then when I was told I had 20 minutes, if you look at this first handout with 7 columns, this gives you just a basic idea of the scope and depth that the topic of financial planning is including. We could spend hours on each one of these columns. I'm not even going to attempt to do any of that. Can I get a quick show of hands? Who's actually a Thrivent member? Okay, so we're among family here. Quick history, Thrivent was born in the Lutheran Church 125 years ago. It used to be known as the Aid Association for Lutherans and Lutheran Brotherhood. At that point, it was purely a fraternal benefit society. It was insurance and annuities, and that's it. 2 companies were married 30 plus years ago and became rebranded as Thrivent for Christians, and then ultimately just as Thrivent. We are now a full financial services company. We do fee-based planning, we manage assets. The core of the original company, the insurance and the annuities, is still really, really robust. There's no right answer. The sandbox that we work in overlaps with attorneys, it overlaps with CPAs and healthcare. We could spend hours and hours and hours going through that. We're also very highly regulated, so knowing that this was going to be recorded, the easiest thing for me to do was to actually queue up a 20-minute video. This is going to talk about the life cycle of an IRA. This is going to cover a number of things topically that I'll dig into a little bit more. But ultimately, people's finances are very, very personal to them. Just as Dr. Plesha talked about age being relative, words like risk or surplus or extra, we've got clients that if they don't have $50,000 in cash in a safe, they are anxious. We've got people that if they have $50 in their checking account at the end of the month, feel like they're on top of the world. So we're not going to get into anybody's personal financial circumstances. I will very happily answer any questions after this. Because the legacy giving is not here today, I am also going to speak a little bit about charitable giving. That's actually where my heart is. My final job at the college before I started the Thrivent was in fundraising. It's fun to help people grow their money. It is 100 times more fun to help them give it away to causes and things that are important to them, especially if they get to do that while they're alive. So that's where my heart is. I'm going to show the video. Real quick takeaways, I just want to get these right up front. If you have not already talked to your people, whether it's your spouse, your adult children or stepchildren, your grandchildren, whoever your people are, start to have conversations with them about your finances, what's important to you. In the last 24 hours, I've talked to a client who was long divorced and she had her bank accounts hacked. Fortunately, nothing was taken. Talked to another woman that I know who had her identity stolen, and she did what I do for 40 years as a career. Talked to a recently widowed man who is paralyzed in grief. We'd spent quite a bit of time with him knowing that his wife was going downhill quickly, trying to encourage them to make some decisions and take some action, and he didn't. And he is absolutely stuck in grief now, and I'm pretty sure that he's going to die of a broken heart long before anything else. Last night we had dinner with my wife's best friend who just lost her mother to Alzheimer's after 8 years. And the service is Tuesday, and because of the family dynamics, we're just hoping that there's not any kind of a brouhaha at the service of the funeral because of blended family and money issues and all sorts of other stuff. So ultimately, money is just the way our lives happen. Helping people work through that to make whatever they want to be true while they're alive and ultimately when they're gone. So with that, I'm going to cue up the video here, and then we will carry on.
You want
Is
light switch?
that helpful?
Quick show of hands. Who is okay paying taxes? Yeah, I have my hand up too. Second question, who's okay paying more tax than after? This is what the 5 phases of the IRA lays out, and as one of our top strategic planning opportunities for you as clients at Thrivent. My name is Eric Murphy, by the way. I'm a Regional Business Development Consultant on the Life Insurance Center of Excellence here at Thrivent, and excited to talk to you about these 5 phases. So if you have an IRA, did you even know that it had 1 phase? How about 2 or 3? All the way up to 5. How many times is your IRA taxed? We're going to get into that. Who's going to pay those taxes? What does it look like when it goes to your beneficiaries? This is everything that is encompassed in this. That's what we call the 5 phases of the IRA. So what we're going to do for you is we're going to paint the picture of the 5 phases. We'll talk about the impact of time. Remember, this is an investment account. When you take money out of an IRA, you pay tax on it, right? What is the impact of time when it comes to those taxes? And of course, we're going to talk about strategies for reducing those taxes as well. So one of the great things, I've been having this conversation for the better part of a decade with clients in the industry. It's coming to Thrivent. This is, I'm now into year 3. And I've seen both sides of the fence. Clients that maybe didn't have a plan in place, and as they walk through the different phases, maybe some of their goals, their dreams, their wants and needs were not fulfilled. I've seen the other side where a plan is put in place and then everything within that financial plan is fulfilled when it comes to retirement income and moving on that money to the next generation. An IRA, we're all familiar with what an IRA is. Individual retirement account. So think of it as a folder where you're going to put money into this folder, and it's invested just like your other assets, stocks, mutual funds, bonds, based on your risk tolerance. But the key is you don't pay tax on it as it grows. That's the idea of an IRA. Maybe something like a 401k that is walks, talks, and acts like an IRA is a little bit more familiar to your situation. You just put money in, pre-tax, it grows tax-free, you have an employer match, and then again, when that money comes out, you pay tax on it. So we call these accounts qualified or tax-deferred accounts. Why is there so much urgency behind this idea of this type of tax planning moving forward? Show of hands, who's heard of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act? Okay. Effectively, what the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act is, in 2017, the majority of us had our taxes reduced. So the tax brackets went down in 2017. But when they enacted the Tax Cuts and Job Act, they also put an expiration date or a sunset date on that act. Does anybody know when that sunset date is? Last day of 2025. So when we wake up January 1st, 2026, the majority of us, and we benefited from this Tax Cuts and Job Act, the majority of us will also be affected by that if Congress does nothing and this Tax Cuts and Job Act expires. And we'll talk about the timing of this in the shorter window that we have to act in some repositioning strategies and mitigating taxes moving forward. Anybody heard of the Secure Act? Okay, so another act that was put into place, this one was in 2020 is when it came in, aptly named 1.0 because it's the first one. A lot of different agenda items inside these Secure Acts. For the purposes of our conversation, the number one piece on Secure Act 1.0, or the top two, I should say. Number one is they're going to let you keep your money a little bit longer. So prior to the Secure Act, there's something called a required minimum distribution. Have we heard of that? That is when you are forced to pull money from these qualified or tax-deferred IRA dollars. You're forced by the government to start taking those as income. 70.5 was the magic number before Secure Act 1.0. Secure Act 1.0 came in and they pushed the RMD age back to age 72. Hey, great news, you get to keep your money longer and you don't have to pay tax on it. Well, there's another side of that too. As that money grows, maybe we're creating a little bit bigger of a tax bucket there for the government. And really, one of the biggest takeaways too of Secure Act 1.0, on the back end, when the money goes to the beneficiaries, prior to Secure Act 1.0, your beneficiaries were able to spread their inheritance over their lifetime. So again, they take over your IRA, they can spread it out over their lifetime, which does what? Could help mitigate taxes as we spread that out. Now, what happens when Congress is sitting in a room and they say, hey, we want to do the Secure Act 1.0 thing and do good by the people, and we're going to push back the RMD age, let them keep it longer, people are living longer, etc. There's always somebody from the IRS in the room. And that IRS agent said, okay, here's the deal. If you're going to make us wait a little bit longer to get our hands on some of this money, we need a concession. So on the back end, they came up with what is called the 10-year rule. So no more inherited IRA stretch from a lifetime. They now have to squeeze it out in 10 years, which creates potentially bigger tax problems. Now, before the ink was dry on 1.0, they came out with Secure Act 2.0. So this is now in effect. Again, a lot of agenda items inside 2.0, but the biggest takeaway for our conversation here today is they again pushed back RMD ages. It is now age 73, and in 2033, we're going to go to age 75. Okay, now let's paint the picture of the 5 phases of the IRA. And it's really kind of simple when you look at this. It's just a picket fence that we draw a line through. Pretty simple, right? We have different markers along the way. And each phase we can label. So there's this first phase that we have here, phase 1, is called our accumulation phase. That's leading up to retirement. That means you are continuing to fund the IRA. You're putting money into that account until you retire. Now, we see 59.5 here. What does 59.5 mean? This is our first landmark age, so to speak, when it comes to these qualified dollars. We can access our qualified dollars without a penalty for drawing it out early, typically 10% on the penalty. So phase 2 is in between 59.5 and our first RMD age, 73 or 75 for those that fall into that category. Okay? Now I ask clients all the time, what do you want to label phase 2? I put that in the hands of the client. I hear opportunity a lot. I like to use this word, control. You still have a little bit of control when you sit down with your advisor and you start to plan what's coming next. And what is coming next is our first RMD phase. So phase 3, first RMD phase, but very important here, how are we filing for taxes as a married couple? Married filing jointly. And why is that important? Lower taxes. Lower tax bracket in the married filing jointly. See this question mark here? To get us into phase 4, something has to happen to somebody. And what does that question mark represent to get us into phase 4? You said first death, you are correct. So we get into phase 4 after the first spouse dies. It's still an R&D phase, but now importantly, how are we filing taxes? As a single payer, right? Single file tax bracket. And I'm going to pause here and just flex a little bit on Thrivent. We are top of the industry of having a conversation with clients about the impact of going into that single payer tax bracket. We've got a great tool called What If Tax. So if you've not met with the Thrivent advisor yet to put your numbers into What If Tax, to look at the implications and the impact of what it's like when you go into that single payer tax bracket, I would say get on their calendar next week and put your numbers into it. We'll dig a little bit deeper on what that can look like from a numbers standpoint as well. So to get us into the final phase, what has to happen to the second spouse? You said second death, you are correct. That gets us into phase 5, which we talked about being the 10-year rule, the IRA now going to the beneficiaries. Okay, so now we've painted the picture. And one of the beautiful things about this strategy is we can take you as an individual and we can plug you into this timeline, anywhere on this timeline, and have a tax planning conversation with you. So there's genius in its simplicity. Now we are going to go to my favorite example couple, Steve and Barb, age 65. They are sitting down with their advisor. They have decided to retire at age 65. You can see their retirement assets, their retirement income. They've got $54,000 Social Security, $12,000 in a pension coming in. Their other assets, $300,000 IRA owned by Steve, $150 joint brokerage account. Here are their goals. They want to maintain their lifestyle of retirement. They sit down with their advisor. They run the numbers. They say $66,000 is good. We can live on that. Okay, what do we do with your other assets? We want to leave those to our adult children. Okay, are you open to a tax efficient conversation when it comes to leaving those assets? Yes, they are. So what can we do with Steve and Barb? We can plug them into our five phases conversation. So when we do that, you can see this retirement line now. And again, when you do this on your own, we'll plug you in and draw the line down. Age 65, beginning IRA value of $300,000 as of today, 6% growth. Now, we have to put an assumed growth rate on these assets because they are going to continue to grow. Now, we're going to get into the fun part here, the numbers. And I will qualify this because if you see me do this and you're like, wow, Eric's a genius. He can just, off the top of his head, come up with these amazing numbers. That's not the case at all. Okay, so let me just qualify by saying we have another great tool called an RMD calculator. I would encourage you to meet with an advisor, put your numbers in. It lays out exactly how that RMD is going to look when you have to start taking that money using the IRS tables. Okay, Steve and Barb, 65, they are not going to take any money out of this account until they have to, until age 73. Okay, so there's growth on that money, and then age 73, they have to start taking money. So I would ask you, that's a 12-year phase 3, that first RMD phase, 73 to 85. So 85, we have to choose an age of death as well in our calculators. We chose Steve. Sorry, Steve. So he goes at 85. So we have a 12-year window here in our first RMD phase. And if I were to ask you, how many total dollars do you think are distributed on the government plan in those 12 years? How many total dollars? But remember, we've got 6% growth on this money, so it's actually $334,000 that get distributed over those 12 years. So more than is in the account today goes out in that first RMD phase. Now, Steve has gone at age 85. We have 5 years for Barb in that single payer tax bracket. That's just 5 years. So how many more total dollars do you think are distributed to her over that time? Do you think it's more or less than the 334? We only have 5 years, so it is less, but it is another $200,000 that comes out. So over the course of Steve and Barb's lifetime, that 300 turns into over $500,000 income tax to them in retirement. But wait, there's more. We still have phase 5. So something is also going to happen to Barb as we've established, and that is she's going to pass away. We use age 90, for example, here. So now the leftover IRA dollars go to the beneficiaries. And remember, 10 years to squeeze that out. How much more is left in the tank, do you think? Is it more or less than the combined 500 plus? I told you it was $750,000 more dollars come out. So now you get the point of this exercise. Steve and Barb come, they meet with their advisor, they're having this planning conversation. We're comfortable with 66, we're good, leaving the 300 to the kids. I'm fine paying taxes, you know, it's what we do, no problem, they'll get what they get. Well, what if I said, Steve and Barb, your 300 actually equals 1.3 million that goes through whose tax machine? The IRS tax machine. Let's take it one layer deeper. At age 73, when they have to start taking this money, does their taxable income go up or down? More money coming in, income goes up. We've already established what happens to Barb in that single payer tax bracket. She'll be paying higher taxes. Now, in phase 5, what I'd like to ask is, do you think your kids will be in the most optimal situation from a taxation standpoint when they receive this money? Most likely high income earning years, etc. They're looking at potential higher tax brackets. So 300 turns into 1.3. And now moving forward, every new phase we're going to enter, you've potentially deferred into a higher tax bracket. Which means what? The IRS takes a little bit more. So you might be sitting there thinking like, wow, Eric, why did I sign up for this? This doom and gloom. This, what I call my forecasting of a tax storm on the horizon, that's coming. But I've got really good news. Steve and Barb are still right here. They're 65 years old. They're in the tax control, the opportunity zone window here. We can still sit down and put a plan in place to talk about repositioning some assets and mitigating taxes as we move forward. So now we talk about what's coming. Let's talk about strategies for repositioning. So those of you out there, many of you are going to be already in this phase 2. If you're still in phase 1, what can you do? Talk to your advisor about strengthening some of your retirement accounts. If it's a 401k, can you go all the way up to the match and then look at other options outside of that with your remaining dollars? Call that portfolio optimization, tax efficiency strategies, putting it into a tax container where they'll never pay taxes on it ever again. Catch-up opportunities. You're over the age 50, maybe you haven't saved enough yet. Work with your advisor to get enough money in those accounts and make sure you can retire comfortably. Those of you in phase 2, Roth conversion is going to be top of the list every time. So real quick, Roth conversion, we take these dollars in the IRA that are taxable to you, and yes, you do have to pay tax on that money, okay? I can't stop that from happening, but you put it into a Roth IRA, which means those dollars are tax-free to you when they come out later. We also have opportunities, that same idea, taking the money now, repositioning into a tax container, none better than a life insurance policy. So if that works for you, to maximize legacy from a death benefit standpoint as well, create some tax-free income potentially in retirement, work with your advisor to talk about that strategy. Now I mentioned you're going to have to pull the money out and pay tax on it now. Let's go back to the beginning, that Tax Cuts and Jobs Act, and why there might be some urgency there. So right now, let's go back to our example with Steve and Barb. You have a Roth conversion conversation. Pull up what if tax. They're in the 22% tax bracket. And you realize with their income coming in, they've got room here in the 22% bracket. We call this the bucket strategy. That's the buckets here. So we've got room. We can go up to the brim before we spill over into that 24% bracket. So we propose, let's just say $100,000 we're going to pull out of that IRA. We're going to pay the taxes now right up to that 22%. And that works in Steve's case. That might work in your case, working through with the what if tax with your advisor. Other opportunities in the other phases. So phase 3, we can still do Roth conversion. We have a great concept here at Thrivent as well called the wealth transfer efficiency concept, where we can take your situation, if you're charitably inclined, you you want to maximize the legacy to your beneficiaries, we have a great strategy ABC that we can walk you through and talk you through those strategies. QCDs, has anyone heard of a QCD? Qualified charitable distribution. You can actually tap into those at age 70 and a half. So going back to some of those magic numbers, if you're charitably inclined, you can pull its index for inflation, over $100,000 as of right now. You can pull out as a QCD. It won't count as income coming out of that IRA, and then it goes straight to a charity or charities of your choosing. In phase 4, you'll see it says Roth conversion, life insurance to pay taxes. So this is one of the more popular strategies that come out of the 5 phases conversation. So if we back up our timeline here and we say at age 65, Steve and Barb want to give each other, the spouses, options upon that first death. So we're going to focus on each other a little bit. And one of the options you can do is when Steve passes away at 85, Barb could convert that IRA into a Roth at that time. She'll have a small sliver of an opportunity in the married filing jointly tax bracket to convert all of that into a Roth IRA. Now, going back to our buckets, could that push us into a higher tax bracket? Most likely it will. Okay? Remember, we have growth on this money. So how do we contend with that large tax bill for Barb in that year? With a life insurance death benefit that comes tax-free to her. That's a way we can offset that, put it in the Roth, and what does that do? Suppresses her, that single-payer tax bracket where she has a higher percentage in taxes. She has more tax-free income coming to her. It's still tax-free to the beneficiaries, falls under the 10-year, has to come out in 10 years, but it's tax-free to the beneficiaries. So as you think about your situation, you might be sitting there right now saying, well, I have an IRA, and I never thought about this 5 phases thing. I want to sit down with my advisor. Here are some things to think about. First of all, the live on, leave on assets. So what do we mean there? If you need the money to live on, you're probably not going to have this conversation. It's going to be part of your retirement income. If you're like Steve and Barb, and it's leave on, you want to leave those assets to their adult children, what we need to ask is, what is the market performance? What is that going to do to my accounts? If it grows, is it a bigger tax bill that I'm going to have to pay? How long are you going to live? We don't know. That's why we have question marks on the 5 phases. We will put numbers in there, but the truth is we don't know. And then what if I diversify using some of these ideas that we talked about? Using the Roth conversion, look at your bucket strategy within what if tax. In this one, what if phase 4 is very long? We're showing a 5-year window for Barb. What if she lives to 100? Not completely out of the ordinary these days. That's a much longer phase where she's paying at that higher tax bracket. And then does that usually mean we have a longer time frame here where that money's growing and more money now goes to the beneficiaries? So just some things to consider there. And then where does charitable planning fit into your plan? Again, I'll flex on Thrivent. We're top in the industry of having this conversation with you. If you have charitable inclinations, we have a great charitable team that'll make sure that everything is laid out exactly the way you want it to go. And we have many, many options and great leaders in that department. So as you can see, this is a lot to take in one session. What I would encourage you to do.
So I'm going to kill that there. I should have prefaced this. The second page was that 5 phases chart that he was referencing. I've got this video. It's public access. So if you want to see that or go back through it again, because there was a lot of information packed into 20 minutes, you can certainly send me an email and I can send you the link for that. For those of you that are already Thrivent members, assuming that you've got an advisor or somebody that you work with, they have access to all of these tools. If you don't have an advisor or somebody lives far away or you're working with Edward Jones or somebody else, they should all have some equivalent to these kind of tools. And depending on their licensing, most if not all of them should be fiduciaries and should be equipped to have these conversations. Some of them may not be interested in it. If you go out and ask 20 people what a financial advisor is or what they do, you'll probably get 30 different answers. There are many of them that I've discovered just from being in it now for 4 or 5 years that just see themselves as wealth managers. They want to take this and grow it to this. And that's important, but as you look at all the dimensions of the first page that I handed out, that can create unintended tax problems or other issues that potentially can be mitigated. At the risk of usurping a little bit more of Charles's time, I just want to show you one more thing. And this may be a little bit hard to see in the back. The number of conversations that we've been having with people about risk over the last month. People who a year, 2, and 3 years ago told us that they had a high tolerance for risk, and in the last 4 to 6 weeks have been losing their minds because seeing the market move by 2, 3, 4, 5, 8% in a day is nauseating. This, you don't need to read the numbers, but this is the S&P 500 going back to post-World War II, the Marshall Plan. So even though you can't see the numbers, what you can see there, I hope, is a really clear sawtooth pattern. The market goes up, the market goes down. It goes through these natural cycles. The important part about this is the green bars, which show the positive growth, are longer in duration and go higher than the red ones that go down. I don't want to politicize this, but if you fundamentally believe in the US economy, innovation, I mean, we are still a great place in spite of all of our flaws. We were due, if you look over here on the far right, we were due for a correction. You can make a pretty strong argument that what's happened in the last 6 to 8 weeks is self-inflicted. But assuming that we come out of this fever dream, there's a lot of reason to think that there's still very positive things ahead. Without asking anybody to raise a hand, I know there's at least a few of us that are not quite to 59.5, or we're still in that first phase of the IRA, and then I'm guessing there's a number of us that might be in phase 2 or 3, or in maybe even phase 4. Over the next 25 years, there is something in the neighborhood of $60 to $80 trillion, trillion with a T, that is going to move from the very few remaining of the silent generation and the boomers down to the Xers and so on. How that moves, it's coming in real estate and agricultural land. It's coming in gold bars that somebody found in the safe in the basement. It's coming in appreciated assets like IRAs and 401ks. It's coming tax-free through the death benefit in life insurance policies. Having those conversations with your people, the instruction I gave you at the outset, is really, really important. We are running into people where the adult children are going to inherit and have no idea what to expect, and in many cases may not be equipped to deal with it. I've got 5 kids between the ages of 14 and 24, and at this moment in time I would trust my 14-year-old to inherit $250,000 before I would trust my 24-year-old. So thinking about how that's going to happen, how well prepared they are. We're upper Midwestern Lutherans. We don't talk about money, we don't talk about sex, we don't talk about a lot of things. It's a lot better to initiate a conversation now that might be a little bit awkward than it is when you're in the midst of a crisis because somebody's in a cognitive decline, or they died suddenly, or in many cases dad did everything and mom doesn't know where it is or how it works. And we can't even find the list of passwords. So I can't encourage you enough to do that. Annually review your important documents, wills, powers of attorney, beneficiaries. I can't tell you how many times we're going through that with new clients and they discover that they've got somebody on as a beneficiary that they don't want on there. Maybe they've got a secondary beneficiary as their son or daughter-in-law, and it turns out they got divorced years ago. Think about your legacy. When you're gone, what do you want to be said? It shouldn't be about how many zeros and commas there were in your net worth. It should be behavioral. If you're in the fortunate position to have surplus and you want to do something, think about how you might pre-distribute your estate, make gifts to the church or to hospice or to other charities. If you've been fortunate to build a really nice nest egg through good behaviors, don't give your grandkids money at Christmas. When they get their first job, challenge them and tell them that grandma's going to match 2 to 1 every dollar that you put into your Roth IRA. So your grandkids never have to worry about whether Social Security is solvent or not. Most important part of all of this stuff is there's a lot of it, it's complex. We discover things all the time that folks aren't even aware of in their own circumstances. It would be like going into the doctor and telling them that you want to run a marathon. They haven't even taken your blood pressure, or they can size you up and say you might want to lose a little bit of weight. A lot of this is very personal and nuanced, and it takes time to diagnose that, never mind come up with a plan. Ultimately, you're the one that has to come up with the plan, and we'll give you the options, but we can't make it happen. We can't want it more than you do. And then figuring out what are the next steps. A lot of this stuff isn't especially fun. Some people are intimidated by numbers. In some cases, they've had the spouse that did it all and they didn't have to worry about it. But I don't want to get into specific kinds of investments. There's annuities and ETFs and mutual funds, all of that. When we talk to clients about being high risk, we're not talking about putting their entire portfolio in Bitcoin or gold or real estate. For me, high risk would be a broad S&P 500 index fund. So we had a conversation with a couple yesterday who said they're really low risk. Well, we talked a little bit more about what that risk meant. They have had some pretty good market exposure and some great growth. She thought risk meant really concentrated positions in individual securities or other things that we would never do. So making sure that if you're working with somebody, they're not talking in jargon or talking over you. You guys are partners in this, and making sure that you know what are your options, what are the up and the downsides of those, and then making thoughtful decisions. So, are there any quick questions? You're good.
When they were talking about putting in life insurance to transfer tax-free to the spouse, is that whole life or like term life?
So, question is about life insurance to transfer to the spouse. So, life insurance death benefits are tax-free, no matter what kind of life insurance. It can be whole life, universal life, it can be term. The downside of term is if you live past the end of the term, then the insurance is gone. In many cases, we're discovering people who could or should have made some decisions about permanent life insurance been somewhere between their mid-40s and mid-60s when they were healthy. I'm 51 and coming to the realization that this is a depreciable asset and things are not as good as they used to be. So the short answer is typically permanent, but it could be any of them.
And if it was like whole life or permanent, what is usually the turnaround to break even on that? Because I'm assuming that the amount you pay into it, you don't quite appreciate that value. So
the question is, how much do you pay in premiums versus what is the payout? You need to sit down with somebody because it depends on the coverage, it depends on the health rating. There's so many, it depends, and I don't mean to defer you, but there's a lot of complexity to that. So, I'm gonna, yep.
Well, for those of us in the room who may be not yet at retirement age or just into it, is there any kind of a, and I know it varies, formula for how much we need to have invested or saved before we retire?
So how much do you need? So my typical question when we ask a client this is, what do you think you'll need to live on? There's a standard in the industry that says you should be able to live on about 70% of your pre-retirement income. So if you make $100,000 a year, could you live on 70? Part of the reason the answer to that should be yes is that you're no longer paying payroll taxes. You're no longer paying into your retirement accounts. In most cases, you're not having to replenish a wardrobe periodically if you've got to dress up. You may not be driving as much. There's a number of things that you may not be doing. So that's one kind of rule of thumb. The RMDs, that I won't get deep into this, but the required distributions that start at age 73 or 75, those are actuarial. So they start at about 4%. And they just go up each year a little bit because the ultimate goal for the IRS is to get you to drain those accounts by the time you're dead so that you fully realize the tax that was due on it over time. So what I would do if I was sitting with you individually is say, could you live on X? And we are running into people all the time. I had a couple yesterday. When they retire, between the two of them, it'll be about $80,000 a year in Social Security income. I said, could you live on 100? Oh, absolutely. We don't have an ostentatious lifestyle. They've got almost $1.6 million, and they're both 63. If they can live on only $20,000 more than they're going to get in Social Security, and if that $1.6 million, most of which is pre-tax, turns into 2 to 2.5 before RMD age, what they think they could live on comfortably at 100 is all of a sudden going to get pushed to 150 to 180 if they get even reasonable levels of growth in their assets. And so this is the exact conversation that we're having with them. You don't want to outlive your money, but especially early in retirement, I would say if you could comfortably live on 100, plan on 120. Take the trips, spoil the grandkids, do whatever the things are that are important to you, because I promise, some of you might vouch for this, when you get into your mid-70s or older, the idea of going through a TSA checkpoint or international customs or hauling luggage through an airport has about as much appeal as going to the dentist. So planning that out, we've got people that have fully paid for long-term care. We've got people that have said, I will never be in long-term care, I promise I will have a hunting accident. And they were not joking about that. So having those conversations, talk to your spouse, what does longevity look like? I mean, Dr. Plesher was great. There's a statistical odd, if a couple gets into their 60s, there's a better than 50% chance one of them will live into their 90s. And depending on age difference, the possibility of that being an extended period of being single is quite realistic. If you have kids, do they live in the same time zone? Eeny, meeny, miny, mo, who am I going to go live with if I'm all of a sudden in a position where I can't or don't want to be alone anymore? So, sorry that was an extended
Okay.
version.
That's all right. That helped.
Charles, I'm going to have you come up and I will get out of your way.
Thank you, John.
Thank